period. It's been great watching this team develop because really a major focus of the board has been really keeping tabs on the transition and sort of the overall process and what has been going on. And it's actually been really enjoyable because we have been able to really think about our community. We've been thinking about where we came from, where we are right now, and where we want to go into the future. And after a successful and long ministry, we are just starting to scratch the surface. There's just a lot of things we really want to think about. And it has been really an enjoyable time to really reflect on the past again while looking towards the future. It's almost as if we have a fresh canvas from which we're going to be able to paint on without any type of distraction. So we have much to consider and decide, and all of which leads to the point that we're all focused on, and that's calling a new minister. So if we want to have the best chance of finding the right person, it is best if we become better acquainted with ourselves, explore different options, really spend time, think about how we minister to each other and to the outside world, and decide how we want to govern and run our congregation. There's really an awful lot of discernment that we want to do. So, and after we feel settled and have a better understanding really of ourselves, then we're able to start formulating what type of person we're going to be wanting to call. Terry?
I will now lower the mic at comical distance. All right. So one of the rewarding parts of a time of interim ministry is this chance, as Joe was talking about, to step back and just reflect on how we want to be in shared ministry together as a congregation. If you had the chance to hear Reverend Doug's sermon last week, or maybe if you read the article from the transition team in the newsletter, you might be familiar with some of the themes that are beginning to emerge as priorities for this interim work. So also in recent months, the board has been looking ahead to understand the process that FUS will undertake to search for our next called minister. While many of us were anxious to get into these details of the search process, the interim time so far has also revealed a number of opportunities for reflective work that will both better position us to carry out the search itself and also to be attractive to potential candidates. So to allow space and time to focus on the internal work without the pressure to move immediately into the search process, the board has actually decided in our January meeting to extend the interim period for 1 full year. So Doug and Kelly are going to discuss in more detail the rationale behind this decision and talk about the benefits of extending the interim time from 2 to 3 years.
So there are several things actually that we want to talk about quickly with you. One is that when we began to work together, one of the things that we started with, before I actually even got here, one of the charges that I was given was to work with Kelly in terms of her doing some discernment around her own ministry and what her future would look like. And so we began, I asked her about that before I even accepted the position. And so we talked about the importance, she talked about the importance of getting a sense of what is possible in the congregation in terms of their understanding of the sharing of ministry amongst the clergy. And so you all have had a long-standing 30-year model of that has been a very significant and powerful model. And so her first concern was what is possible in terms of the larger congregation and their vision of what they expect from their clergy team, and what is possible in terms of it being more collaborative and more of a shared ministry within the clergy team that then moves out into the rest of the community. And so the first thing that we have been doing since we have been here is to experiment with the idea of Kelly and I sharing the ministry more. And so we first came in before you in terms of the worship team and presented a model that really took Drew, Karin, Kelly, and I, putting us in front of you more often in terms of what happens in worship. But behind the scenes, Kelly and I have been working to try to figure out how to sort of balance out and to practice without making it official, really seeking to share more of the power in terms of how we work together as clergy. And so we have been experimenting with and making major decisions. We are in conversation with each other. And if someone approaches us for less major decisions, that both of us are empowered because we've been in conversation with each other to make decisions. And if in doubt, we would just say, we need to check in. And so we've begun that work. But one of the first things we realized and that you need to know is that if you move into the search in basically 2 months, the congregation and you will need to know what that new model of what that new relationship will look like. And Kelly will need to have moved beyond the 17 or so years that she's had here with a vision of what it would look like. And first of all, when we talked about it, one of the first things that became clear was that we need some time to really explore with the congregation, with Kelly herself and her own discernment process, with other congregations that are about this size that have had successes in different models of clergy cooperation. And so the first thing that we realized is that if you continue with the current model, then we basically need to rush to a new model that is outside of the 30 years experience that you have, which in and of itself sounded like a pretty catastrophic thing to move towards. The other thing that we also realized is that if we search now, as you just looked at in your financial situation, you have gradually lost financial strength over the last 5 or 6 years. And that has made a significant impact in staff salaries, the number of staff that you have, and in their staff development opportunities. And so if you went into search right now, any minister who is really good at what they do will really case you very carefully in terms of how you're spending money and what sort of indicators there are for future success. And so if we went into it right now, what they would see is that your staff has decreased. Your salaries have not kept up in almost every case in moving them towards fair compensation, and probably long-term most damaging, you have the lowest levels of staff development funding that I've seen in any congregation right now. I mean, it's just a reality. I don't even mean comparative to the size. I mean the actual dollar amounts that your staff are given to continue to do their job. So those things in and of themselves said to us, this is an important time for us to work as a larger congregation on trying to move in a direction that is more consistent with what's possible for this congregation. We know there's a lot more generosity that is present, and Steve is very excited about helping you explore that. We also need time to explore what it looks like for us to share the ministry and to discover with you what important things we need to address. And the other thing is that this is an important time for us to explore who you want to be to the larger community. While you have had some relationship with the community, in the last few years, in many ways, that relationship has focused more and more internally. And so this is a time in our ministry for us to explore what you hope for in the future in your relationship, first with Madison, but also as one of the larger congregations in the Unitarian Universalist world, and what it means to be larger and what it means to be a resource congregation that in some way takes the lead and shares your resources with the larger movement. And Kelly actually talked to the board as they were thinking about this and weighed in. So Kelly, just say a little more about what you're thinking in terms of your experience.
Okay, thanks. So I first heard about this, a 3-year interim, when I went to the interim training that was put on by the Interim Ministry Network, sponsored by the UUA, back in August. And one of our facilitators started talking about, she's currently an interim, and she had said, I'm talking with the congregation now about the possibility of a 3-year interim. And my first thought was, what kind of crazy talk is that? Because in my mind at that moment, it was like, okay, we've had change, we're going through change, let's get our permanent person and make this stop, right? And so then I started listening to the priorities that Doug has laid out for us for the coming 2 years, if we stick with the 2-year model, so the coming year and a half. And when I looked at that, and at one point, I will admit, I called Karen Gustafson, who many of you remember, and left here and became an interim. So she's aware of this, and I just said to her, what's this 3-year business about? And you may remember that she would preach often on the work of William Bridges, who wrote a book called Transitions. And she said, well, don't you remember what I used to say? That what William Bridges says is change is situational. Transition is how you adapt or adjust to the change. And so our situational change is that our minister of 30 years retired. The transition is how are we going to adapt to that change? And part of my discernment about my future work here is really listening to you. Who do you want this congregation to be in the future? What is your vision? What do you value? Where do you want us to go? Where do you want your ministers to focus? Because to do any honest discernment of my own, of what is my role in that, I need to know what you want to hold on to, what you're willing to let go of, what you're willing to change. And that's the information we need to do. And when I think about it, I don't feel that we can do that level of thinking in the next 2 months before we then start pulling a team together and start pulling together our information to say, this is the person we're looking for. Because we've thought deeply about who we have been, and we've thought deeply about where we want to go, and we're really confident in the direction of where we're headed. And so this is the person we want to come and help lead us to do that in the next 2 months. And I really want us to make this not just situational change that our minister retired. I really want us to do that deep work of transition, to answer those questions and to take that breathing space. Because what happens as soon as we have a search team together, our energy is going to move in that direction. And so our energy will shift away from the who are we and where do we want to go as a congregation. And it will go to, awesome, who's coming next? And so I don't feel that we're ready to do that energetic shift yet in the next 2 months to focus on our next person, because really the energy will move quite drastically into just looking at that search process.
In the fall, I mean, this upcoming fall, that would be your primary focus as a congregation. And so more and more congregations, it isn't a statement at all of weakness. It is that many congregations have begun to discover if they really want to move into the new era in a place of strength, then they need at least another year. But another year really allows them to make some significant changes that will attract a much broader range of strong candidates than if they rushed quickly forward. The other thing, Kelly, is you said a little bit about just your experience of this time of change and what it's been like for your ministry, because I know a lot of people have been very curious about how the change has affected you. And so you said some things to the board, and we've talked quite a bit about it. Would you be willing to say just a little bit about? No? Okay. Never mind then. say a little bit more about what your experience has been of us beginning to work together and what that makes you think about your future of ministry, because I think that's an important part of what we want to explore in this time.
Yes, it is. It's absolutely fascinating to work with Doug. So after you can imagine, right? After 17 years with one person, day in and day out, and Doug's different. Did you notice? Has anyone... Raise your hand if you notice that Doug's a different person. I'm just wondering. Okay. So I feel, I can only speak for myself, so the other staff in the room, shake your heads if I'm totally off base. I feel that the staff is feeling empowered in ways that they haven't in quite a long time. The staff themselves are feeling stronger as a collaborative team. Doug and I doing a lot of the day in and day out work together, modeling that from the two of us. It's really modeling for the whole staff of how to, we've been talking for, I don't know, since I was born, about the silos that we have between our programs. And we've always been talking about, we need to break down the silos between our programs, and we need to get staff working together. And that's happening now. And I think that a large part of that is watching what a shared clergy team, how that can, and I don't know if you felt the difference in worship, and part of it is we're having fun. And it's an amazing phenomenon to be talking about worship on the level that we do now, and to think about, well, tell me a little bit more about what you think you're going to talk about, and then I'll tell him a little bit about what I think, and hopefully you're feeling the cohesiveness in those services, and just the beauty of collaboration in terms of giving you all different access points into a theme of a month coming from different experiences and different views, but we're hoping that you're feeling that collaborative nature in all of the work that we do, and especially in worship services. So I think that beyond just the fact that I'm having a heck of a lot of fun right now, I feel like I think that's true for our larger staff team as a whole as well. This week we were closed on Wednesday with the schools, but we did our staff meeting by Zoom. We had never done anything like that before, and it was just a riot because we're all in our homes and we're showing each other our pets, and we're saying, Cheryl, your couch looks really comfy. Show me that pillow. And it was just, we're getting to know each other in ways that we haven't. Even some of us that have worked together for a long, long time. And so I feel like the benefits of this experiment are spreading out a lot farther than just the clergy team, but to the staff team as a whole.
So in the next, our priorities are this, that we will continue to work on not just with the staff, but with the congregation at looking at models of clerginess, of how the clergy team might look, and what power and authority in shared ministry would look like. We will continue to work with the staff to increase morale, to do what we can to pay them better and to support them as an important resource in their development. We'll work with you in terms of doing shifts in your culture of generosity, and just how you think about what is possible with time, talent, and financial resources in the congregation. And then finally, we will really work with all of you on thinking about what you want to do in the future out in the world, how you want to be a force in the world and be in deeper relationship with this community and with the larger Unitarian Universalist community. So that's what our vision is for the coming months as we work together. So that